Welcome to Remotely Interested, the podcast where we talk remote working, work life in general, and top tips to successfully work from anywhere. Today we'll hear from WIEBKE HARRY. WIEBKE has nearly 18 years' experience working in the insurance industry. She deals with commercial debts incurred by overseas buyers. Although WIEBKE is in full-time employment, she has both significant experience and an interesting approach to working remotely for a remote-friendly global company. Originally from Germany, WIEBKE made London her home nearly 20 years ago, and she recently visited us here in Portugal for a workation. WIEBKE, welcome to the Remotely Interested podcast.
Hello.
Hey, thanks so much for agreeing to be on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. So for our viewers and listeners, can you tell us a little bit about your working practice and how remote work is a feature in your job?
So thankfully, I didn't have to switch from full office work to full remote work during the pandemic, because we had already been doing 2 days a week from home in the company where I work. I think we had been doing that for about 3 or 4 years before the pandemic kicked off. So we just switched from the 2 days to 5 days. I think for a lot of people, that experience has only come in because of the pandemic.
Sure.
But I was experiencing that before that. So I work for a company that's basically global, but the head office is in Germany. It's a big insurance company. You'll probably know it. And I think generally, because it's based, the office I work for is in London, I think it was already around the city and the Docklands, it was already quite a normal sort of practice to do a little bit of working from home for the sort of insurance, banking, finance type of jobs, office jobs.
Yeah.
So I was lucky in the sense that I was able to do that for a couple of years before all of that kicked off as well. So I've been doing it for a long time, really.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's why particularly I wanted to speak to you, because it was some years before the pandemic, wasn't it, that you were already in a hybrid role. Can you remember which year roughly it started?
I want to say 2016.
Okay.
Around about there. So it was definitely at least 3 years before the pandemic kicked off. Yeah, maybe even 4. Could have been 2015.
Exactly. Yeah, excellent. And like you say, the company that you work for are actually quite flexible in that regard, in spite of the fact that you are employed, you're not a freelancer.
Exactly. We've actually introduced a new type of, if you want to expand that definition of remote a little bit further. So we've introduced a new rule for all staff, basically globally, that you can also work 25 days a year from abroad.
Yeah.
So you can apply. You have to apply for a month in advance. You can do 5 days consecutively maximum. And you can just apply to whichever country you want to work in for a week. I do it quite a lot because my family is based in Germany. So last month I went for 2 weeks. I did 5 days of work and 5 days of time off, of holidays, to spend a bit of time with the family. But I was also able to spend evenings and weekends, obviously, while I was working there with the family as well. So that's brilliant. So we've got remote work in terms of you don't have to be in the office at all times. You can also be at home, and also you can travel while you're working. So you can have more time to travel, see family, see friends, or just travel somewhere that you want to go to, really.
Yeah,
Whatever
it's
suits you.
amazing. Yeah, because I mean that was good fun. Was it last month? Goodness, time flies. When you were here.
It was 2 months ago, yes.
2 months ago already. Oh goodness. And you were able to come here, and we all worked at the same time, but we were able to meet for lunch and still go out.
That's right.
And I just thought, yeah, this is the future. Not to necessarily have to take leave in order to go away and see friends, but to work in tandem, work together. Although we don't work together, but be geographically in the same place, and then able to enjoy catching up with friends. So yeah, you'd opted to work partially remotely since 2016, we've already established. Now, I mean, what would you say are the positive aspects of being able to work remotely?
So many. I don't even know where to start. Well, obviously the obvious benefit is you get more sleep because you don't have to travel.
Yeah.
So you have more time. Whether you want to use that to exercise in the morning, or to make yourself an elaborate breakfast, to meditate, to whatever, go for a walk, or if you just want to stay in bed longer, whatever you want to do, you can do it.
Yeah.
Because you have that time. Also the cost, you don't have to pay for a commute. For some people that will be, I don't know, £10 a day to get into the office. For some people that in my team at the moment, for example, it's about £50 for a train ticket to get into work from quite far off in the countryside.
Yeah.
So that's a massive benefit, obviously, a huge cost saving. Other things I would say, just from a well-being perspective, you don't have to get as dressed up. You can just sort of be in your own comfortable clothes. You can be in a position that you want to be in sitting wise. You can have your comfy chair, or you can do, theoretically, you can do it from the sofa, or however you want to do it, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah.
You have time in your lunch break where you can do things. You can cook something rather than going out and getting something processed. That's not very good for you.
Yeah.
You can take that time. You can get some fresh air. You know, depending on where your office is, you might not have the same opportunity to go outside and just sit on a bench or something, or go for a little walk. And also, I have to say, a lot of the time, chores and housework, because if you take a 10-minute break between meetings, you can just, I don't know, put a load of laundry up, or prepare something for dinner later, get something out of the freezer, so that by the time you log off, your housework is already got a head start, or is already done, if you've, caught up on some things in your lunch break. So when I was working full-time in the office all the time, I just felt that I spent 3-4 hours on a Saturday just doing chores.
Yeah.
And it just sort of, eats into your weekend more. So now I usually aim to be done by about a Thursday night with everything that I need to do. And then I can just enjoy my weekend, really, from Friday night onwards.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's such a good point, because I'm the same. And if you were actually in a physical workplace, you would take regular breaks. But what would you be doing? You'd be by the water cooler, maybe gossiping.
Having a coffee and a chat,
Yeah, about stuff that's not, very useful, or, making a drink. Okay, all things that maybe you want to do, but it's so much better to use that time at home, those short breaks, to actually do things around the house. Yeah,
absolutely.
Really good. And then
it seems very mundane, but it's just so helpful.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because usually I don't find housework particularly refreshing, but it's a refreshing break from work. So I actually come away from a menial housework task fresh to sit down at my desk again and get my brain in gear again. So
and it helps to also get a bit of movement, because I feel like when you're in the office, you naturally move around more because people ask you to come and look at something or things like that. But you don't, when you're focusing and you're in the zone, sometimes you realize you haven't actually moved in 3 hours.
Yes.
So it's good to get up and move around a little bit, walk up and down the stairs, get laundry up, anything like that, just to get your blood moving a little bit, because it's just better for your body and your mind.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's a good schedule all round. Okay, let's be balanced. Nothing's perfect. So what would you say are the negative aspects sometimes of remote work? And do you think these negative aspects can be overcome?
I think there is a risk that you don't have enough separation between your work and your personal life. So I would say there is this risk that you don't switch off properly, and you're never really fully in one or the other mentally. But I think there are ways you can overcome that. I think one thing you can do, for example, is to change your clothes. Like, say you've got a certain outfit that you work from home in, and then once you start your afternoon, to change into different clothes. That's one thing. Or you can have a little ritual. So every time that you shut your laptop, you could do something like, I don't know, put your favorite song on repeat for 10 minutes or something. I don't know, watch a specific TV episode, or go and walk around the block. Something that sort of mentally separates the two and severs that connection. What also helps, I find, depends on whether you have a permanent desk set up with screens and keyboard and everything there anyway. But for me, I don't really have that, because I also use this space for other things like pottering about crafts and dinner and so on. So I tend to just have my laptop, my mouse, my headset and everything here. So when I'm done with a working day, I usually put it back in my work bag, even if I'm not in the office the next day, just so it's sort of visually out of the way and I'm not looking at it. So it kind of helps a little bit to have that out of sight, out of mind a little bit. It helps to sort of separate that a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, really good tips. I like the idea of having different clothing as well, and even changing the atmosphere in the home with music. I think that's a really good idea. It's simple, isn't it? But it's
it's just little things like that just mentally make you connect with other things. Just get you away from one mindset into the other.
Exactly. Can you think of any other negative aspects of remote working?
I think depending on whether you're more of an introverted or extroverted personality type, it can be a little bit isolating for some people. So I think some people absolutely love it because they don't want to be talking to anyone by the water cooler.
Yeah.
For the sort of person that quite enjoys the interaction and the collaboration, it can be a little bit challenging, I think. So I think some people during the pandemic struggled with that. And ever since we've had this arrangement that you can work from home for 2 days a week, even long before the pandemic, there were people who chose to come in 5 days a week because they just felt that they worked better in the office and they liked having people around. They found it too quiet at home. So, that's also something that can happen. Also, another thing that some people have an issue with is that you get too easily distracted by things. like they can't focus on their work because they might have pets that constantly want their attention, or children, or because they're just naturally not very good at focusing on things, so they get distracted by things around them. Whereas in the office, there's not really anything to distract you because everybody around you is all working anyway.
Okay, yeah.
There is for some people naturally a challenge to try to focus on what they're doing when there's other stuff around them that they might think, that looks really dusty, I need to clean that, or I don't know, oh, I've got to remember to do this, and they can't focus because they're surrounded by things that aren't work related. Whereas when you're in the office,
Yeah,
everybody around you is working, and most people directly around you are probably doing the same job, so it's kind of mentally easier to stay on track sometimes, I think, for some people.
yeah.
Personally, I don't really struggle with that so much, but everybody's different, so yeah, it's just something that can happen.
Yeah, it's something that keeps coming back in discussions about how important discipline is when you're working. And those that struggle with being self-disciplined may well struggle with working from home. But at the same
That's
time,
true.
it's a quality that surely all of us want to work on anyway, whether we're in the office or not. We want to be disciplined. We want to make the best use of our time. So
Yeah,
if remote working is going to force us to be more disciplined, then so be it. You know, it's like any valuable skill, it requires work.
It's very transferable to other areas of your life, isn't it? That kind of approach. I think what's useful for that, since you were asking about solutions for that, is things like, for example, if you get very easily distracted by your phone going off because you have a lot of WhatsApp groups texting you or something like that, it can help to just schedule time. So for example, if say you log on at 9 and you know that you're usually quite productive in the morning, put your phone on airplane mode for an hour and a half, really focus on one thing specifically and make sure that you get that done and dusted, and just don't get distracted. Don't have the TV on or music on or anything, unless music helps you concentrate. It's different.
Yeah.
And try to have a block of time where you really get stuff done, and then take 10-15 minutes to just do something else and get distracted, get a bit of energy back, and then do your next block of work. So you're having a block of work where you really concentrate, and then a break in between, rather than constantly sort of floating in and out of stuff. I think you just get more done that way. And make sure that you minimize distractions.
Yeah, you're putting guardrails in place for yourself in advance, just to help you along with being more disciplined. So yeah. I want to come back. I found that really interesting about your colleagues who chose to go in for 5 days a week. Would you say that that's the majority, or
No,
a large minority?
I can think of maybe 2 or 3 people that do that.
Okay.
That specifically choose to be in the office 5 days a week. To be honest, most of those, one of them I can think of is, he does quite sort of intense project type of work where he's very much dependent on other people. So they have to collaborate a lot, like any project that they do, they do a lot of system testing and things like that. So I think he's very much dependent on other people. So it's much easier for him to be around in the office and hope that other people are in, so they can have a quick meeting and discuss things rather than doing it online, because they can look at the screen together. So I think just personality wise, also it's got something to do with the age group as well. Most of them are probably mid to late Gen X, I would say.
Okay.
So we're talking 50 plus, who just need the office environment and enjoy it more. And for their role, it just made sense for them to do it.
Okay.
But I think literally less than 5 people in the whole company of, what are we, like 300 people in the London office?
Okay.
Yeah.
Super interesting. So really,
but it's good to know that for them it's an option if that's what they want to do as well. Yeah.
And they've stuck to that since COVID.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
And they came back the minute they were able to, because in the beginning it was sort of half optional.
Yeah.
Until we were all told we have to come back for a couple of days, 3 days a week. Yeah.
Okay. You've been working remotely for a while, interacting with your team, interacting with customers. So you know the pitfalls, you know what makes an appealing remote worker as well, an appealing colleague. So that's my question really. What's the kind of communication style, work style, general behavior that makes it more pleasurable to work with a certain person, would you say?
Remotely specifically?
Remotely specifically, yeah.
I think a general willingness to get on a call rather than message about everything, because it can save a lot of time, rather than going back to explain something about some issue that you have with the system to a super user. It can be easier to just call someone and do a quick screen share.
Yeah.
And I think on the other hand, you can also overdo it with the meeting. Some people just have to have a meeting about everything, which is also a bit of overkill. But I think generally having that flexibility to go, right, let me just drop this, I'll have a quick meeting with you for 5 minutes, sort this out, and then move on with what I was doing before, So I think a general flexibility to have that communication where it's needed. But I have to say, I mean, in my team specifically where I work, this sort of thing works really, really well. Everybody's extremely helpful with each other. So I can't really complain, but I know that in other departments it doesn't work as well. What also is a really, really good idea is initially when we started the remote working, we had a rota where we always made sure that somebody was in the office. So every day out of the 10 people or 12 people that we had at the time, would be 15 max, there would be at least 2 or 3 people in every single day of the week. Whereas now, post-pandemic, we're more worried about finding at least one day a week where all of us ideally, or at least most of us, are in together.
Okay.
So that we can have a team meeting together. We usually go out for lunch together, or everybody grabs lunch and we sit in our little terrace at work, little lounge, and have lunch together so we can have a bit of a catch up. Sometimes we'll go out for a drink afterwards if anybody wants to join. So I think it's good to have that attitude of, if you go in the office, make it worth your while and make sure that there's other people there that you can actually work with, rather than just coming in to tick a box.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important as well, that people come in because they want to work together on specific days. If you can make that work, obviously most weeks. That's also a really good idea.
Yeah, that sounds like you've got a really good balance there then. Like you say, making actually being together and building those relationships, but also when you're working remotely from each other, still communicating effectively, frequently, but not too much. I mean, out of interest, do you tend to give each other a certain amount of notice before calling a meeting, or is it quite flexible?
Whether your manager wants to discuss a new process or something with 5-6 different people, then obviously we would get a decent amount of notice. Usually, at least, like, someone will say 11 o'clock, can we discuss it at 2-3 p.m. or something like that, or even a day before, several days before. But if it's a matter of me discussing something with one other person where they're asking me how to show them how to do something, or whether we're an issue that I need to raise, then it can literally be a matter of messaging someone saying, are you free? And they might say, give me 10 minutes, and then I call them in 10 minutes, and that's that. So it's the one-to-one things can be very spontaneous, yeah. But the team stuff, we usually get a little bit of notice for, just in case you need to prepare, you know.
And I guess that makes sense, because in an office context, there are conversations that you have quickly with each other at a desk.
Yeah.
And that could be spontaneous. Yeah. And then there are actual meetings in the boardroom that will require a bit more preparation, and therefore there's more notice. So yeah, effectively it's a similar communication that's possible online as well, isn't it? So
that's true. Yeah.
It sounds like you've got a great team who communicate enough but not too much, who build.
I'm quite lucky that way. I think I'm quite fortunate there, because we all get along actually, which is also great.
Yeah.
So that's rare but very precious.
Exactly. And not asking you to name names, obviously, can you think of a remote interaction that you've had with a colleague or even a customer, and there was something in particular they were doing that made it difficult to work remotely?
I think there is a bit of an ongoing discussion about people having or not having their video on when they're on a call.
Yeah.
So I've had a few calls where I was literally the only person that had their video on and nobody else did. So you sort of feel a little bit like you're talking to a wall. So that can be hard. But I also understand sometimes, depending on, what sort of person you are and how you're feeling, you might just not want to have your video on sometimes. And I don't always have mine on, so I understand that. But if you're someone presenting something and you get no feedback at all, because obviously most people put themselves on mute when they're not presenting, and then you also can't see anything. So sometimes it's a little bit awkward because you've got no feedback, you don't really know what's happening, and it's a bit draining doing that. Yeah, so it doesn't happen that often, but yeah, it can be a bit awkward. So I think if other people have their video on, then I usually switch mine on as well, just so they don't feel so alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. It makes such a difference to get that visual feedback. It's not necessarily about saying anything, but we say so much without opening our mouths, don't we? So
yeah.
To know
just
that
to see someone nodding or sort of following, it does help. Yeah,
exactly, that they're at least engaged with what you're saying, or even you want to be able to see if somebody disagrees. You can pick up on that quickly.
Yeah.
Then open the discussion perhaps into a different direction to solve an issue. So yeah, completely agree with that. Excellent. Well, thanks so much, WIEBKE. So far, this has been super interesting. And so, as you know, this is the Remotely Interested podcast about remote working, work life in general, and top tips to successfully work from anywhere. So you've already provided plenty of information about this. Now we're going to turn to the Mosaic Gold plate of questions.
Okay.
Yes, it is the 21st century. And this is how we're going to go about it.
It's very high tech here on this podcast.
Very high tech. You can see that I've spent a significant amount of the budget on this section of the podcast.
Yes.
Okay. So you will see the question will be selected at random. And it will give our listeners some more information from your experience. Okay, let's go for this one.
Oh, drum roll. The excitement.
Okay. So what is the unexpected skill or character trait you would say is essential for your role that people might be surprised to hear?
Unexpected skill for my role. Oh, it's a tough one. I think probably for my role, specifically because I work in debt collection, which might shock you, but you have to be quite sassy and tenacious and quite determined and assertive. And I think on first impression, people tend to think that I am quite assertive, but I can also be a little bit too soft sometimes. So I think having that grittiness to you is something that you have to work on for that type of role. Or, you know, similar to, for example, sales as well. If you want to achieve your goals, you have to be like a dog with a bone a little bit. You have to sort of keep going, where other people might find that quite tiring with time, but you have to get used to that.
Yeah, that is interesting because obviously we've known each other a long time and you're a very confident communicator. But it's interesting that you're saying that your personality alone wasn't enough then for that role. It's something that you've had to work on.
Yeah,
even
it's something I've had to work on.
Right.
Getting a little bit more pushy with people.
Okay.
But I think with age you get into that as well. You just have time for a lot of nonsense. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks, WIEBKE. That has been really interesting. I really enjoyed our chat. And we've barely scratched the surface, I think, because you've got many strings to your bow. You speak several languages. You've lived and worked in different countries. And so perhaps there'll be a follow-up episode at some point to delve a bit deeper into how remote working has enabled you, you know, to broaden your horizons. So thank you so much and see you soon.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
So we've seen how remote working policies can successfully be implemented within a global company. We've seen the lifestyle benefits that arise from remote working and the adjustments that you can make to your environment to maintain that all-important separation between work and home life. And also how it's key to find the right balance when communicating with colleagues and clients, respecting the difference between short catch-ups and longer meetings by giving the right amount of notice, and keeping cameras on where possible. So, if you're even remotely interested in remote working, I'll see you next time.